between action-packed AAA games, one of my favorite types of games is a short, palate-cleansing indie. After spending so much time in a giant world and investing so much of myself into a long, intricate story with a huge cast of characters, the next game I try to pick one where it's just me and the game. One where I can dive right in without having to sit through 40-minute long cutscenes. One where I don't really have to be invested, like it's a friends with benefits game. But more often than not, these palate-cleansing games end up sticking with me long after I've finished playing them. And despite our no-strings-attached relationship, I become obsessed. The stories these games tell are impactful, and an impactful story is one that sticks with you. These games have virtually no dialogue, so how are they hooking me in? How do you tell a story without words? I spoke a little about environmental storytelling in my last video, but it's a huge tool in visual media for storytelling. Everything plays a role here, from the asset design to the musical score, and even something as simple as the color palette. Recently I played through the Room games. The Room? This is a tough sentence. Recently I played through the Room games, and this is not just a puzzle box game. There is an overarching story theme, and puzzles help you unravel clues to what happened. Basically, you're a sort of detective trying to figure out why someone went missing, or why someone was killed, or why a house exploded. Each stage has a major puzzle box that you need to try and solve, and as you pick up clues to open the box, you also find clues to what it contains and what happened. This is a mystery story, and the music, graphics, and tone all play a role in creating that overarching mood. Despite the use of natural physics to solve the puzzle, the mood fits with the story of a detective trying to solve a case that's way beyond the laws of physics. The asset design is Lovecraftian, the music is eerie, and since your brain is already on high alert trying to work through the puzzles, it makes moments like this feel especially unsettling. This game's story may feel heavy-handed compared to the other examples in this video, but I really want to highlight the range of power environment has over a story. You may have heard me talk about Rime before since it's one of my favorites, but this time I need to go into spoilers. So skip to the timestamp on the screen to avoid spoilers. I definitely recommend playing this game first because Rime's environmental storytelling is its greatest strength. Despite no dialogue or text, this game's music and color palette so closely reflect the emotional story beats. The beginning is bright colors and light music while you explore this new world you've found yourself in. When you solve a stage's major puzzle, you're rewarded with a triumphant symphony. Later, when the game's progression means dealing with a great loss, that triumphant symphony is now one that reflects this story beat of emotional despair. Look at the contrast between these two different story beats in this game, and pay attention to how the colors and the music are used to create completely different moods. Each of the game's stages have their own mood, their own tone, and their own story beat. This is deliberate, and even matches the story the game tells, an allegory of the stages of grief. Throughout the game, you played as a boy who was lost at sea when sailing with his father, and washed up alone on a strange shore. The boy befriends a fox, who leads him further and further up a tower, in which a shadow in a red cloak is always looming around the corner. Between stages, memories seem to indicate that this red-cloaked figure may be the key to finding the boy's father. Throughout this journey up the tower, each stage earns its emotional story beat, and this game plays your heartstrings like one of the instruments in the beautiful musical score. However, the game's final stage, the acceptance stage of grief, hits the hardest. Instead of playing as the boy, you are now playing as the father, whose son died in that storm at sea. You make the long, laborious journey into the son's bedroom. You can spend as much time as you want there, picking up the son's toys, but eventually you find yourself understanding that you need to let go. And the game has you symbolically do this by carrying the red cloak and letting it get carried by the wind from the window. This last gut-wrenching moment is further experienced because the game doesn't tell you how to do this, doesn't do it for you in a cutscene, but hovers there in perpetuity until you let the cloak go. As a side note, I'm just thinking about this now, but this is such a good allegory for navigating how to accept loss. No one can tell you how, you just have to figure it out yourself. And even in the game, your heart is torn and you don't want to, but you know you have to. But what about more ambiguous stories? Stories that are more subjective, and the takeaway is more personalized to your experience with the game. Let's take a look at Journey and games with a similar experience. These too use environment in a way that tells a story, though in a much more subtle way. Journey's story is about, well, the journey. While it is a deeply subjective story, let's for the sake of argument say that the story is relating to life's journey. How can you create an environment that relates to everyone's life? Journey's environment is much more ambiguous so that it can easily be relatable to any audience. The scarf's growth can be related to the wisdom that you gain along the way, and how you get that wisdom, or even what wisdom you gather, is yours alone to experience. Journey's storytelling is both subtle and ambiguous so that you can look at it with the filter of your own life experiences. Of course, you've probably never been hunted down by a giant sea monster, but this can easily be applied to an obstacle on life's journey. Your own life experiences are the paint, and Journey is the canvas, and they must work together to tell the story. More often than not, short games like these stick with me for years after I've played them just because of how much effort they've put into making sure the story's delivery is not just understood, but truly experienced.